Sí, sí, sí. Gracias. Muchas gracias, compañeras y...
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. We are about to start the next session. Dear colleagues, thank you so much. We are starting the third session.
Compañeras y compañeros, vamos a empezar.
Dear colleagues, the next session is about to start. Dear speakers, dear guests, please kindly take your seats. We are about to start the next session. Thank you so much to our organizers. Thank you for awarding the flag to Maria Jose, and thank you, Maria Jose, for being here. And that said, I'd like now to say that we are about to start talking about the European Union challenges. So the speakers, you are welcome to join me on stage.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. It is now the time to start the conference organized by European Greens. We are very much grateful to have this opportunity to have a European perspective that, of course, we share with our family. I would like now to welcome Eloisa, who is ready, and we've seen him before today, but we never had enough of him. Laura Rebull, Kate Yusuf, Ángel Villabona, and Mar Jiménez. Big round of applause to all of them.
Bueno, pues...
Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this conference organized by the European Green Party to mark the 15th anniversary of the Green Party in Spain. The title of this panel, as you can see, is Toward a Sovereign Europe in the Face of Noise, Democracy, Energy and Future. Today we want to talk about European sovereignty, not as an isolation, fear or withdrawal, but as the ability to protect citizens, guarantee rights, produce clean energy, defend democracy, and speak with a voice of our own in the world. Against noise, we need politics. Against populism, we need real solutions. Against climate energy, we need a green, social, and democratic Europe. So let's go ahead with it. And I would like to start with Eloy, who is next to me. And we're going to be talking about the European sovereignty, and that's energy. Something that, of course, is very important to all of us. And it looks like we have light at home and it's like magic, but really it's not magic. It's about a change of model that we, the Greens, propose. Eloy is a researcher and expert in energy transition, and the truth is that for a very long time, Europe has relied on fossil fuels. Let's see. Europe has relied on fossil fuels for a very long time and depended on countries that are authoritarian. And that is why energy sovereignty cannot be built looking at the past. It must be built with renewable energy, with efficiency, electrification, storing, public planning, and social participation. Now, we also know that energy transition faces delayism and denialism. We need to act. So, Eloy, how do we build energy sovereignty based on renewables? How do we respond to delayism and the NIMBY movements without ignoring the concerns of the territory? Well, thank you so much to European Greens. And thank you so much to the Green Party for the invitation. And I am sorry if I'll repeat myself, because you've heard me before. Ines is here. And by the way, a lot has been said, but you don't know something. But it is thanks to Ines that now, whenever I ask Google Maps to come back home, I get different options. And the best option is always to come back cycling, which means that I have to come back home cycling. So let me tell you that at 2 a.m. I remember being in Madrid in the bicycle. Oh my God, this is real energy transition. And I would like to start talking about sequels, if you like, cinema, and you've watched Godfather, and I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. If you've watched Godfather 2, you might say, wow, what's an amazing way of turning things around to create yet another amazing masterpiece. And then there are other sequels in the European Parliament with von der Leyen. And quite the opposite happens. We were told, and we believed it, we were told that Europe wanted energy sovereignty, Europe wanted a Green Pact, Europe wanted net zero by 2050. Now, what we see in this second mandate is the following. And I think we've mentioned it, the silence of the EU in Gaza. We can also mention the fact that we serve Donald Trump's demands and also energy demands, because when we talk about energy sovereignty, we think about aspects that are maybe a bit distant to us, the Strait of Hormuz, or the fact that we depend on these and all these other countries. Now, the reality is that in 2021, the European Union had Russia as a partner. They bought the most part of natural gas. That has been reduced by 2/3 in the past 5 to 6 years. But do you know who is our main partner to which we buy the most part of natural gas? That is the United States. So at the end of the day, the fact that we have this sovereignty, is this something that we need to control. In Spain, we don't have oil, and well, the fact as it is that in Spain we do have sun and we have wind. So when we face this transition, there are many ways of looking at things. There are extreme positions. On the one side, we have colleagues from environmentalism who are in general against technology. Maybe we don't have any of those here, but I think we all acknowledge that speech asking for a decrease in material things, saying that with 7,000 million people, it's simply not possible unless we go back in time to the 18th century. In fact, it is what they proposed openly, but let me tell you, for the current society, that is simply not possible. In the other side of the coin, we have people saying everything should change so that nothing changes, replacing war machines for others. But if nothing changes, it'd be like, losing a big game, though you've been very, very close to it. At the end of the day, it's always the same companies with the same systems, with the same forces. Even though you have a seat at the ministry, you have an obligation to do other things. So sometimes in the middle ground we might find virtues. So we need to understand that renewables must be installed somewhere, and of course people will live there, even though it is scarcely populated. In Spain, people live, and we need to listen to them. And the very same project, maybe in other places, might be profitable and great, but with science in hand, you may say, well, it makes sense to install these here, but still we need to listen to people and not just be like, okay, I'm an engineer and I say that this plant has to be installed here. We need to be humble, go places, explain what we're doing and listen to neighbors. Maybe you need to change your project, maybe you need to adapt it, maybe you need to change the land. We need to be humble. Here I have some questions. And what arguments do you think Greenseeds should have in mind to defend a quick and efficient green policy? Well, I think this is something that everyone understands, emissions. And we need to understand that people are not so much concerned about it anymore. So you need to showcase again that emissions, it is not just a piece of data or millions of tons. Emissions is about flash flooding, drought, for example, the fact that it is very hot in school, the effects of greenhouse effect. So we need to use reality. When we installed self-consumption in my building in Madrid, a very big building, my argument was 99% based on money, because that's how I thought I would convince my neighbors. And I was very surprised, because when the neighbors met and we approved the measure, let me tell you that we have a community of nuns that live in those flats. And one of the nuns, when voting with 3 flats owning, she said, well, I think it's great that we save, and at the same time, it's great that we do our bit to have a more sustainable planet, and that was just great. I thought to myself, I'm here speaking about money and how much we can save in the invoice, but she was actually aware of environmental issues. You know which lever you can put. Of course, money is there, but there are many other levers. And lastly, I'd like to ask you about energy communities. The other day, together with green communities, we were at an event with other organizations. And the thing is that energy communities, of course, have an obvious goal, producing energy, and on top of that, created that silent green revolution. What do you think of them? Well, I think they are an amazing tool, but it is wrapped in an impossible legislation when installing self-consumption. And I didn't even think about creating an energy community. I mean, it made no sense in that case anyway, but it's something that's quite complex. So, of course, there are networks that can help, and things are starting to get traction in that sense. But any support is great, because many people might not be very interested in creating that. Some people may just be interested in saving money in the electricity bill. But there's people who are very alone, and feeling part of something, that sense of belonging is very important. And one of them could be, for example, taking back this community, because you can start installing PV panels, but then we can buy a shared car. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity there. Well, thank you so much, Eloy. We encourage you to follow ECO with 3 O's, because they do a great job for energy communities. So thank you so much, Eloy, for your contribution. Big round of applause to him.
Damos la bienvenida a Bula.
Welcome, Vula, who just joined us. And now we're moving on with Laura. Laura is a unionist and an environmentalist activist. She's part of UGT, and I was very much surprised of listening to her perspective. Her presence here is fundamental, because for a very long time we've tried to face unionism and environmentalism as if protecting the planet and protecting the working class would be opposed objectives, but that is not the case. We believe quite the opposite. There is no just environmental transition without unions, and there is no unions that can ignore climate emergency. Climate crisis is affecting working conditions, for example, heat waves, health at work, production changes, sectors in transformation, and inequalities that are deepening. Laura, why is it so important that unions incorporate climate fight as a liberal, social and democratic struggle? Well, in the first place, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here, and thank you to the European Green Party. And why do we need that? Well, we have a very easy motto. I mean, the thing is that we need to adapt ourselves. It's not just that it will come in the future. I am very young, but I've been speaking about this for a very long time. It is already the present. It is no longer the past of the future. I mean, after the flash floodings in Valencia, in the east of Spain, many deaths happened. that could have been prevented. That is why it is so necessary that unionism takes environmentalism as a key pillar, because we have digital transition and ecological transition, and unless they go hand in hand as their common challenges, we will face problems. In fact, the just transition concept comes from unionism from the states back in the 70s, because throughout measures and new adaptations, they realized that workers were lagging behind. It is not my blame if I work in for example, mining industry. It is part maybe of the identity of my family because my dad, my grandfather worked there. So what does it mean? I will lose my job. I mean, it's very interesting. I am an activist at Greenpeace, and in 2018, we created a big campaign to close nuclear plants. We achieved it, and the excitement is crazy. I mean, I still get goosebumps when I think about it. And years after, I visited those territories where the fair transition happened, where these thermal plants were closed. And just to give you a real example, in Teruel and in Andorra for 6 years, they've had the thermal plant closed with a project that has never become a reality, because they've been waiting for a declaration of environmental action, because of course that's very important. We cannot degrade the environment again. We wouldn't be changing things. So environmental impact assessments are key, but they must be timely. After these years, they've been denied the project. So the renewable implementation project about implementing renewables is not becoming a reality. So that hope of the citizens that lived there is lost. I mean, they've had to move to Barcelona, to Valencia, to Madrid, and different territories. So we are unpopulating those areas even more. 6 years after, that project is not becoming a reality. It is very important that when putting in place these transition projects, we incorporate fair transition, anticipating ourselves, because projects must be timely. Otherwise, we won't have a transition. It will be a close and a restart. That is why from the union we defend that this must happen, because otherwise someone else would do it, but we need to think about the territory and about people. And how do we apply fair transition from workplaces? That is a difficult question indeed. Well, it is very difficult to make someone understand that maybe in 2 years' time their job placement will disappear, that they will have to change their job, and in many cases they might need to train in their free time. So one of the measures that we demand is that training is fundamental, and it must be included in the working hours. Otherwise, I'll be investing more time during my working hours, and that is not something that I demanded. Something else that we demand is the figure of the environment delegate. There are many measures being implemented. For example, in Spain, there is a sustainable mobility law saying that different plans had to be put in place, for example, due to extreme heat in Spain, and they must be incorporated throughout green collective bargaining. That requires trained people with the capacity to incorporate all those measures that we need to incorporate in agreement. The law must be present in workplaces, and that requires awareness, training, because people, for example, who are working in a nuclear plant, and this week we have annual workshops from UUT, and people say this is a challenge that we have, we need to tackle it. We still don't know how, because that is a broad discussion, but I know that this must happen, and I will support it. Now I'm supporting it with consistency, and especially with great effort. I'm going to now ask a question that is not in the script. There is progress that we've managed to achieve after different learnings that we get from environmentalism, flash floodings, and people commuting to work, and because they were commuting to work, they died. Now, this government managed to approve climatic permits. How is this idea welcomed across unions? Well, of course, that is something that we had been working on internally, and we were already demanding. Unfortunately, these collective bargaining came after a horrible catastrophe where we had many souls lost. That is horrible, but permits can still be improved. It's like, okay, we are happy, but we need to keep fighting, because a year afterwards, many companies have not put them in place, and it is a legal requirement. So we need those protocols in place for workers to know them, because otherwise it's useless. I mean, it's useless to have a protocol that nobody knows about. And especially they must be real. For example, now we have, for example, red warning, but if you go to work, you'll be paid double. That is something that we cannot allow. You're playing with someone's vulnerability. Maybe for someone, getting paid twice as much is something that they need. So those type of actions, we need to monitor them. We need to keep a close eye on them for them not to happen, so that companies don't get their benefit without thinking of the quality of life of people. Thank you, Laura. I'd like to talk about the working conditions in the land, especially because we have the regularization companies, colleagues. Heat waves mean that people can die, people that don't have maybe the capacity to demand their protection. Thank you so much, Laura, for your perspective with that green view in the workplace. It is a pleasure to have with us Kate Yusuf, because she's been a key voice in the Green Party in the past few years. Kate, I hope I didn't know you so much, but I do, and we are so much grateful to have you here with us in Spain in this European Greens Conference. Now, where it came from, Kate Yusuf is from the party that is becoming a success in the United Kingdom and in Wales. Big round of applause for them, because they will make a great success. I am so much certain of it. Kate is a spokesperson of international affairs of the Green Party, and she has a view focused on international law, the defense of the Palestinian people, the defense of Ukraine, human rights, multilateralism, and also the future relationship between the UK and the European Union, which is something that we are very much happy about. A sovereign Europe is also based on its relationship with the world, and people cannot defend democracy inwards but then turn our backs when international law is violated outside, cannot defend sovereignty of Ukraine against imperial aggression, and be ambiguous when we talk about Palestine or when we talk about the protection of the civil population. Consistency is a way of democratic sovereignty, and Kate brings us a very interesting perspective of a country that left the European Union, but today many people are looking towards Europe, against Brexit as a project of isolation, deregulation and national withdrawal. But against that, there are comeback movements, the rejoin movement, to build bonds again with the European Union. Because if we speak about a sovereign Europe, a democratic and a green Europe, we need to wonder how to meet again those who never stopped feeling Europeans. I would like to start talking about the European side of things. What role can European Green parties play to defend Ukraine, the right of the Palestinian peoples, and the need for a more coherent and united Europe?
We disrupted cross-border supply chains, and we left ourselves exposed. We created this vacuum where our leaders like Keir Starmer become closer and closer aligned by being weak to those who subscribe to authoritarianism and maniacal tyranny like we are seeing in the United States with the crazy man Donald Trump. This is what isolationism does. 10 years since then, polls show time and time again that millions of people across Britain want to rejoin the European Union. In the last 5 years alone, statistics show that over 50% of the entire Britain want to rejoin. This year alone, we've reached 60%. When you look at the statistics of progressives, it's even higher. So if we look at in Britain, statistics across our Labour Party, our Liberal Democrats, and the Green Party, 84% of Britons want to rejoin the Union. Why do those numbers matter? Because it means that progressives can be a leader in rejoining the movement. And how do we do that? It means that they show that the center of gravity in Britain is shifting towards a progressive and internationalist future. It means that progressives have a real responsibility to lead rejoining. Now, the when about rejoining is determined by the how, and how is determined entirely based on public support. And this is the model that I want to discuss, that we are using within the UK that I think we can apply outside of Europe. Our movement of rejoining cannot repeat the same mistakes of the past. Referendums are good, but they can be politically divisive, and we don't want that. They can reinforce divisive politics. We want an ambitious, not muted, national conversation about rejoining the European Union, but in order to do that, we need public support. So how do we get public support in a fractured, very divisive country where tensions are incredibly high, and we have a leader who is kowtowing to tyrants across the globe? How do we appeal to those voices? How do we create that trust? We want to foster public support beyond using leaflets and beyond using town hall debates. Those are valuable, but they don't work alone. What the Green Party of England and Wales is doing is saying we need to set up citizen assemblies. What are citizen assemblies? They are small representative groups of people that are chosen by sortition, chosen at random, to represent the local community. Why do we do that? Because we know from research on policy framing that the way an issue is presented shapes public understanding, which influences public support or opposition. That makes the design of the process just as important of the outcome. And this is why the Green Party is calling for citizen assemblies. It brings a representative group of people together to examine evidence, question experts, deliberate solutions, and have tough conversations about their needs and interests. This is the way we have democracy actually in action, in the process, to bring democracy further into the future. It builds public awareness by giving people, average people in local communities, clear, accessible information rather than slogans. It strengthens public support by involving citizens directly in shaping the conversation. This reduces polarization by creating space for respectful, evidence-based discussion. And in turn, we hope to build an informed electorate of people who at minimum respect each other and hopefully at the end trust each other. And that is how we shape it. Leaving the EU pushed the UK towards isolationism. And isolationism weakens democracy. If we want to strengthen democracy, we need to rejoin the EU. But the only way we get there is by using people-powered decision-making, which is to say, we work to safeguard democracy when we use inclusive, cooperative, democratic processes to build public understanding. It's the only way to achieve support and an informed public. But cooperation must never become coercion. Internationalism only works when it strengthens, not silences, the voices of those most affected. Whether that means Britons who are fighting against Brexit, or that means civilians in Gaza demanding a future free of occupation, solutions must be shaped with people, not imposed on the people. If we live that commitment in practice, we show that the public, that the Greens are a political home for building democracy in real time, not just talking about it. Building democracy within and beyond Britain, which gets more to your question, means ensuring that foreign and domestic policies place human dignity at the center of every decision. That means recognizing that a habitable planet is a precondition to any dismantling of inequality. It also means treating human rights as the bare minimum, not some radical idea that we use in political rhetoric when it is convenient. Human rights must apply always. They are the foundation on which we build everything else. That is always the starting point, especially for any society that wants to call itself democratic. People are tired of hollow promises. They are tired of political theater. They are tired of governments that speak the language of human rights while selling weapons to those who violate them. And so the Green Party has to continue to grow as a reliable political home for those who refuse to accept double standards. We need commitment and consistency, and where that matters most are our laws. Our laws are what keep us consistent. Whether it's Ukraine or Palestine, international law must apply consistently or it collapses. We cannot have a European Union that applies international law selectively. Strict when it condemns our adversaries, but when it inconveniences our allies, it's optional. The system fails when inconsistency is applied. We cannot speak the language of peace while enabling the very conditions that extinguish it. As a lawyer, I want to remind us that international law is not a realm of abstract ideas. It is an index of our shared values, exhibited in the commitments we have to each other, in treaties, in conventions, in customary practice. The law is an imperfect instrument, but it is the only instrument that humanity has that comes anywhere close to having a moral compass that we can all use. So it must be the library of information that we turn to. And it is intellectually and morally dishonest in political rhetoric to charge and call upon international law when you are refusing to uphold it in policy, in governance, or in practice. So let me close by saying this. We build democracy when we stand together, together in conversation, together in policy initiatives, and together in law. We strengthen it at home when we make decision-making people-centered, and we include citizen participation. We strengthen it abroad when we put equal human dignity at the center of our policy initiatives, no matter what they are. And in the most important way, we safeguard democracy when we start with what we have all agreed to share, and that is a commitment to our international laws first. If we do not abide by the commitments that we have put in black and white ink to keep to each other, everything else will fall. And that it will start with democracy. So that is how this tripartite way that we safeguard democracy at home and at abroad. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Kate. Con tu intervención nos ha quedado claro que Europa no es una institución, no es solamente una frontera, Europa es también comunidad política, democrática y de valores compartidos. Pero es que además una Europa soberana no es una Europa pequeña ni cerrada, es una Europa capaz de defender el derecho internacional, de actuar con coherencia y de tender la mano a quienes quieren volver a caminar.
And of course, helping those who want to work with us. Thank you so much.
Bueno, pues seguimos por orden.
All right. Next up, Ángel Villabona. Let's now listen to the youth perspective, which is so much needed. The future looks difficult, so we need to have the youth to retake spaces because they will be the ones who follow after us. Ángel is representing the Federation of Young European Greens. He's just been elected, so big round of applause to him. Ángel, when we talk about future, we tend to talk about the youth as if it was a metaphor. Now, the youth is not a metaphor, it is a generation that suffers the consequences of decisions that someone did not make. Unaffordable housing, precariousness, climatic anxiety, wars, and a democracy where usually we ask the youth to participate, but then they're not given the real power to decide. Now, my question is, Ángel, what does the European Green Youth need to actually have a political impact in Europe? I'd like to start by debunking a few myths about the youth, saying that the youth are from the far right. That is a lie, which is part of the society. And in general, society is leaning more towards the right. So it means that there are young people with that follow right-wing parties. Then others say that the youth have been brainwashed. Well, yes, but the entire society has been brainwashed. And it is much easier that someone who is not young believes fake news than it is that young people does, because we are digital natives. We understand how this social media works. They're part of our lives and of our way of understanding the world and of being part of the world. That said, the youth is mobilized. In Spain, for example, it is not very much mobilized in left-wing parties. That is something that we see in our party, but also in most left-wing parties. And I think this is basically related to a couple of things. Within the parties, maybe we are not able to handle the youth issues, for example, in the housing. The government is doing great things, a government that we need to preserve in the next mandate, and I will be the first one who will keep pushing so they stay in the mandate. But if you defend a government that's doing nothing, when you spend 90% of your salary in your rent, and if you're unable to have a future plan, then, I mean, it's difficult. You're not getting any support. This is what happens, and that is why in the Inquilinas Unionists, there's a great deal of young people. I mean, they can fight for their right and fight for proper housing, but not necessarily supporting a government that is not really doing a great deal. And then I also believe that there isn't much participation from the youth in parties, because though we are having more and more voice. For example, in Madrid, there are more young people. Myself, I'm here. Alejandra is also young. But that said, I think sometimes we don't just need a voice. And I'm, of course, in favor of gender quotas. But on top of that, we need that voice to be really heard. And we need to be part of the decision making. Because it's like they don't take us seriously. We are treated as little children. In this party, it doesn't really happen, but it has happened in the past. I've had colleagues who were very upset after certain meetings. Now, happily, we are fighting for that to stop, but it has happened in the past. And now we do have great participation from the youth in the participation of this event. This is great. But mobilization outside parties and mobilization within parties, we see these in clear examples such as in Serbia. I think that for a couple of years, students have been mobilizing a great deal because there was a tragedy with trains, there were dead people with corruption. I'm not very sure about the details, but they are very much mobilized, and we need to use that traction and take it to a party. And this is due to the system. I think students are creating a list to create partnerships with parties. But I think there isn't a party in Serbia that's able to articulate that. And I think the reason is that they are not being incorporated into the decision making, even though parties want to hurt them, but it's different. And I guess that those of you who are here know what I'm talking about. I know that you know what it is to speak and not being heard. So I'd like to mention another example, which is a positive one, an example of how we can have youth participation within a party. It is the case of FEND, which is it is a party that joined the assembly past weekend, and the average age of the mother party is 17 years, if I'm not mistaken. That's crazy. I mean, the average of the mother party is 27 years. I mean, they are younger than myself. It's crazy. So, and I'm also not very clear about how they get organized, because I haven't been working there for a very long time. So I've only had a couple of conversations with people from Romania who were part of the assembly. And I think that it's very much related to these, with how the party is structured, and very much related to how decisions are made and how politics or policies are articulated from within the party. Ultimately, just like it happens with intersectionality, with queer people, for example, that picture is not enough. Being part of the picture is not enough. Being able to speak is not enough. We're just a part of society, and we are affected specifically by all of the issues that affect the rest of society, but more to us in a more specific way, because we have other conditions. And that is what I wanted to share with you.
Pues vamos a continuar por aquí.
All right, we are moving to the end of the session. And I'd like to introduce Marc Jimenez, Treasurer of European Greens, and he'll been helping us think about a sovereign Europe in the 21st century. Europe, in theory, was born as a cooperation project on energy, natural resources, and peace. But in the 21st century, we are obliged to update that project from the climatic emergency, democratic crisis, inequality, fake news, and the threat of multilateralism. The single market cannot be the ultimate goal of Europe. It must be a tool at the service of the social rights, democracy, environmental justice, and green limits. Mark, here's my question. How should the European project be rebuilt in the 21st century for European sovereignty to mean, again, democracy, social justice, and green transition and not just economic competition. Well, thank you so much, Mar. It is really an honor to be here with you in Vitoria-Gasteiz in this relevant event for the history of the environmentalism in Spain. I've seen many familiar faces that I've known for 15 years. And by the way, today it marks 2 days of the starting date of the European elections to the European Parliament from 2024, from the 6th, which were from the 6th to the 9th of June. So that means that the next election will take place in 3 years' time. So I think it's a good moment to take stock. From the European Green Party, we wanted to take part of this session together with the organizers of this panel, and we are very happy to be here. Thank you so much to the attendees here and those joining online. You've said it very well, the energy component within the European abstract is crucial. The first structures that were created were the European Community of coal and steel, and that was really the origin of wars, of fight for resources, and that is something that we have very much in mind. Unfortunately, it has not changed. We are in a context where it's clear that for these fossil situation generates destruction, and it is certainly a threat for democracy. Therefore, we as Green Movement, and those who've been here for a while will know it very well, you'll know how many times we've been called idealist. We have been called, only based on ideas. And in 2024, at the elections to the European Parliament, after successful years, after the Green Wave in 2019, that we suffered a backlash wave together with other elements, such as, for example, feminism. We suffered, and one of the main attacks were based on anything that had to do with climate policies. Laura, you've explained it very well. Maybe we couldn't explain ourselves properly, but this transition, this environmental transition, was not really against the work movement. Rather, the idea was to help ourselves, to guarantee workers a better present and future. Right now, it's ironic to see that we have Donald Trump, which is #1 climatic denier, who is actually putting it very easy for us to put on the table the possibility to defend that our energy policies are not just climatic policies. Of course they are, but on top of that, they are socio-economic policies of first level, and they are really the solution to many of an instability focuses and threats to democracy that happened the world over. We don't really need to go farther from our borders to see it. Now we have this opportunity. It's not just, we don't want to say, hey, we told you. By the way, yes, we told you, but on top of that, we of course need to be very much aware that we have a new opportunities, and thinking about the upcoming years, thinking about the next elections wave at national level. Of course, we have an opportunity to stand up for that. Now, it's true that to do so, we absolutely need to keep working together with unions and with the different collectives from workers to really explain our policies. Now we have a great opportunity. The single market issue that you mentioned, of course, that was a European integration engine for many years, of course, that was regarded as a tool, and in part, it did its job, but in the past 15 years, we've seen that it has its limitations. The neoliberal logic will not be the salvation of Europe. we have a person from Greece who is the co-chair of the PBE, and there isn't anybody better than her to know about the damage that austerity policies created as a response to the crisis of the 2008, and this generated significant social fracture that almost led to the collapse of the European Union. Therefore, the reflection here would be that the social element is paramount to bring about democratic stability, because this is how the far-right ghosts started to arise. They are not just at the front door of our houses, they are at the heart of our institutions already. So this is a crucial element on the other side. Good news is that the COVID crisis, which generated to an economic crisis, it shows with different limitations to a lower scale, but it showed that there were different reactions. We had the resilience and recovery mechanism, for example. There was also the response to the energy crisis due to the war in Ukraine after the Russian adhesion. And so there was an attempt to respond from a European perspective, but precisely it was not a market policy, it was a public intervention policy. Public funding, investment, debt, which is one of the elements that are also on the table, and therefore I would like to share with you one last thought, which is related to European construction. Well, have a look. Right before this 2010 economic crisis, there were treaty reforms between, for example, the Lisbon Treaty. There were reforms every more or less 5 years, and that was a period of certain stability. Since then, and many things have happened, it looks like it is taboo to talk about the reform of treaties when actually it is visible that the European project has a clear need of a new boost. We've had Orban, for example, and I would like to underline that it is great news for the European Union. And in fact, the European Green family played a key role in that change after 1 year ago, when there was this institutional strike. We had a mayor from us in one of the 5 European countries, and thanks to the courage of Jerry and thanks to the European Green family led by Vula, who were there, we were very, very fortunate to advance in European politics in this geopolitical enclave, which is complex. So it's great. I just wanted to share it with you here. Thank you so much. And I think, Mark, by the way, Krasoni, that surname that I struggled to pronounce, they said it was impossible, but we managed, we succeeded, and that was largely thanks to the push of the European Green Party, because we went out to the streets, even though they said it was dangerous, but there we were, because we were not willing to leave anyone behind, because the rights of LGBTI people are not, it's not something that we are gonna give away. And now, let's move on and speak to the boss. As you know, Vula is the co-chair of the European Green Party. There is an issue that we are very much concerned about, and it is something that weakens democracies: housing. Rosa Galindo is with us, Ana Cortés is with us. Every day they defend the right to housing, and from the European Green Party, it's something that's very clear for us, and that's why we've started a campaign. Europe cannot just be an institutional idea or a geopolitical idea for millions of people. Europe starts in a very specific question. Can I live in my city? Can I pay my rent? Can I leave my parents' home? Can I have a life project? If the right to housing is in doubt, then there's the democratic European promise is also in doubt. There is no real freedom without a home. There is no real equality if our cities expel the youth, families, and workers and vulnerable people. We're going to start talking now about the housing campaign, to talk about houses to be lived in and not to speculate. So the question is, what is the European Green Party defending in terms of housing, and why should housing be a European priority?
That's correct. Before I answer to your question, I would like very briefly to come back to two issues that colleagues mentioned. First of all, the 8th of May this year, we adopt a common declaration among the party leaders, all party leaders among Europe. And we are the first political family making an appeal for the UK to join. And I'm extremely proud of that. I mean, that was one of the ideas we developed because we saw that the UK is coming closer to the EU, but very much in the perspective of a market and not of a political project. And I think that we somehow, because we ended first page in some important newspapers, I really think that somehow we can be proud on the fact that we really have a vision for the European Union. Because the European Union, without reforms that we mentioned this morning, but also without a solid enlargement, will be a very isolated project. But the two things, they need to work together. Enlargement without deepening and making a more political European Union will not fly. And therefore, I really think that we can be proud that we started at the European level this debate, that our relations cannot be just commercial or just because of Ukraine or because of Trump or trade, but it is much more than that, because after 10 years, as Kate mentioned, I mean, everybody see how disastrous is the consequences of Brexit. And at the same time, the progressives, they need to be united, because after Brexit, nobody wants anymore to leave the European Union. And therefore also the fascists, the extreme right, they want to stay in the European Union, and they want to erode the European Union from inside. So we have really a very big battle to do in front of us, reforming in a progressive way while enlarging, because we want to have a bigger impact. And my second remark is when it comes to Serbia. Because indeed the movement of the citizens and what happened in Novi Sad, where myself, I was there September last year, have been quite a crucial moment for the political profile of our family. I have been personally attacked with a very heavy word from President Vučić. He went publicly to say that because we have been with an MEP of the European Parliament, Rasmus, in Novi Sad, and we were present with the students in full solidarity, that he wanted to put us in prison, that we are dangerous for the country. And suddenly, after 2 or 3 visits, Vucic made us, without us wanting that, famous as one of the voices that they stand with, I'm talking about not me, I'm talking about our political family, with the students, with the civil society, with the media repression, with the political prisoners, and our voice, I must say, is, after these visits, very much heard. Last Thursday, it was the president of the European Council, Costa, visited Vucic. The day before, we were all over the media by saying it cannot be business as usual. He has to go to talk to the opposition, he has to go to the students, he has to speak with the media, and he has to explain what are the complications in the country, because Vucic is turning the country in an autocracy. And I say that because it is important for us as European Greens. It is not only the European Union, but it's also the commitment we took when it comes to the enlargement countries. And you cannot have an enlargement country if you do not respect fundamental rights, rule of law, the Copenhagen criteria. So these people are hanging there, waiting what it will happen. And if van der Leyen, if Costa, if Commissioner Kos is going there and they do not say what's going on in the country, we have a real problem. So these are the 2 points, only to make also a little bit the connection of how us, the European umbrella, tries to respond to these issues. Coming now on your question. Of course, housing is a priority, and it has been decided the 8th of May by the party leaders to launch a campaign. Why? Because the housing today became a market and not a value, not anymore a fundamental right. And the housing is something that it is intimate, it is a necessity, it is a public good. It should be perceived in a completely different way. And I have to be honest with you, through the last 1.5 years as committee, we really wanted to give a more human profile on our ecological agenda. We repeated social justice is the ecological justice, but we needed to find one item to campaign that touches the life of the citizens. And I can tell you, myself, I'm an urban and regional planner, so I'm not completely disconnected by the item. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, nobody could believe that we will talk on the issue of housing as a European issue. Nobody was thinking that we will have a commissioner. This happened because the public pressure was there and people were asking solutions. And therefore, the Commission decided to bring forward a commissioner and to try to do something. But what in the reality is going on, unfortunately, is completely different of the nice words. And there, I would like to say, that goes very much among a lot of political families, including, unfortunately, the socialists, which they were very good to talk about housing as a fundamental right, and de facto, in practice, voted completely the amendments differently. So I prepare myself, and I would like just to show you the 3-4 amendments that they have been voted down in an initiative report in the European Parliament on the housing. These amendments, they have been proposed by our political family, and we have the roll call votes. Therefore, in our campaign, we will use them. So we will not really be soft with who did not commit to have to give instruments on what's going on. Amendment 94, make home renovation fair and accessible. This is not a detail, simply because a lot of money they have been given to renovate the houses, but de facto in a way that the richest, they could benefit, but when it comes to the people that they needed to have access for this renovation, it was an impossible way to get the money because of bureaucracy or because of co-financing. This amendment was voted down with majority of the political groups, and of course during the campaign we will make it visible, and of course the next step is to be able to act on that. Put an end to speculation. I mean, it is so big, this question, so big, because simply it is the Airbnb, is the tourism, is the people that they can really have and a lot of apartments and play with the market, the prices of the market, and therefore the crisis of the housing is a crisis all over Europe. Some years ago, it was only in the south. Now it is in the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, because the house became a market. And we asked rules to be able to manage this speculation, to regulate, not to completely make it inaccessible for, let's say, the businesses, but make sure that at least there are rules when it comes to the access to the most vulnerable people. And homeless by 2030. We know that this is not realistic. But even this amendment, that it is a matter of principles, was voted down, and this is really shameful. And the last was stop short-term rentals from driving up rents. And this means being able to not kick out from every wonderful city in Spain the citizens because of the markets. And there are ways to regulate the Airbnb. There are ways to cap rents without really stopping a certain degree of being in the market. Also, this amendment has been voted down. I will conclude by saying, outside of the amendments, there is the issue of money. And the next big fight that is going on in the European institutions is the budget, is the multi-annual financial framework. Cohesion Fund, Social Fund, Florent knows extremely well. What this Commission is doing, Mar, is trying to centralize completely all the money in the hands of the governments. Mrs. van der Leyen wants to have good relations with the bosses of the governments, and therefore the regional dimension or the local dimension or how to get access to the funding from the mayors, that they can really, in a direct funding, respond to the concerns of the people, build social housing, investing on the real needs. This is not happening. Yesterday we were with Mark in the event of the regionalists. They are fighting on that. This is really a common fight, how to get access to the funding from the regions and from the local authorities, because they will be able to respond to the daily concerns, regulate partially the market. Some at national and at the local level they are doing, but our ambition is to do it at the European level, to really bring forward the best practices. And therefore, the fight on the budget and the fight on the direct funding to the mayors and to the local and regional communities, it is very important if we want to be able to regulate, but also to give some hope to young people that they are still young at 30 and they stay in the family because they cannot afford to find a house. So for us, this is an important campaign. We will launch it by the end of the year. In the party leaders meeting, we told them we need to do it not only on the papers I brought, old-fashioned, but really with questions in the governments, with political pressure, with a real mobilization, because there we can find with us trade unions, citizens, groups, young people, a lot to have a real mobilization that this money is not making richer the rich people and poorest the people that they really need an alternative. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Bula.
Thank you so much, Vula. It is really an honor to be part of this European family that worries about housing and for whom it is a priority. As José said, it is our national priority. People must have a home, must have energy, cheap energy at home. The youth must be able to access the housing market, and workers must stop suffering. We are sticking to time, so I will launch one last question to each of you. I will launch a common question, but you can all answer individually. If you had to choose a single priority for Europe to take back the democratic trust in the next 3 years until the next European elections, what would it be? Eloy, let's start with you. I was not prepared for this. It was in the script, though. Okay, maybe I didn't read until the end, says the speaker. Well, I think one of the main priorities would be a global priority. I think most of us here will acknowledge that ecological crisis, the loss of biodiversity, geopolitical tensions that we face in Europe with Russia or with Donald Trump, all those price, energy crises, they are all different phases of the same coin. I mean, one of the issues that we need to tackle is we need to tackle them jointly, and it's just about energy transition. We will achieve it, but we need to think about how will we achieve it, with more equality, or will we reproduce the inequality that has taken us here? Will we consider the citizens and the most vulnerable sectors, or are we going to turn our backs on that? And especially, are we going to be quick enough, or are we going to delay action, electoral cycle after electoral cycle? Laura. It is difficult to select just one, but there is a sentence that always comes to mind, which is putting life at the core. And it may sound very common, but public services are worse by the day, so it's very difficult for people to trust public institutions when our quality of life is worse than our parents' quality of life. I mean, I am lucky enough to have a job. I am lucky enough to have to live independently, but my colleagues don't have that situation. Our public services are being eroded. The quality is worse, so we need to really invest and think that life is not to work, life is there to be lived. So we need to strive for life that is worth living. And not just to generate profit for others. That would be the key point that we should achieve in the next elections. Thank you so much, Laura. Kate, it's your turn.
It is the foundation on which all of our work rests. If we cannot uphold the agreements that we make to each other, what hope is there in working together? On how to take action for the most difficult international issues. We do not need a court to tell us when genocide is happening, when we have over 100 countries that have signed up to a treaty saying they know what it is. We need to trust in each other by sticking to the laws that we already have, so that we can trust that when we make an agreement, we are going to follow through on it, that when we use language, we both know what it means, that when we set goals, we have a plan, that when we make promises about what we are not going to do, we are going to stick to it. And when the rule of law is under threat, is questioned, is obfuscated, we turn a blind eye to it, as if it's not that important, or we're just going to wait for years for an international court to tell us what we already know. We are saying that the commitments we have already made are not that important, or we don't know them that well. And then we ourselves, we discredit the own work that our experts, that our politicians, that our government leaders, that our people have put together. The most important thing on any topic is to stick to the agreements that we already made so that we can trust each other, move forward, and at least build on the work that we have already done.
Y desde este evento también
I would also like to send some support words to Francesca, because it's a very good example of how all rules of the game are being broken, how the international law is not being protected. She cannot have a bank account. They have broken into her house. She needs to be living in other countries. And in fact, her husband has been dismissed. She's been politically prosecuted. And she is a special rapporteur from the UN for Gaza. So big for her. We are next to you, and we will continue to report your situation. Angel. It may sound strange, but I think that one of the main priorities as Green would be to keep pushing towards the European federalization and put an end with vetoes in the Council, so that we really move forward and have a more democratic union. Because, as Mark very well said, Trump is an amazing opportunity to actually build a strong Europe that plays a role in the world and does not depend on anyone. Let's not do the same that was done in Palestine. There was a majority in parliament a few years ago. There were about 17 countries that wanted to break the agreement. The agreement has not been broken. And in this case, it's not just due to Orban. There's also Germany and other countries involved. But I think we need to put an end on veto, because otherwise, what are we here for? We have social majorities that have a wish, but then they see that governments are not really leading by example, and governments are blocking those kind of things. So we need to really make people believe again in institutions, and we need to keep pushing towards European quality. And it sounds very as something that's related to right-wing parties, but social rights, healthcare, work rights. I mean, myself, at least, I don't want to be similar to the state. I don't want to live in the state, and I would never allow Europe to become something anywhere similar to the state. So yeah, we need to talk about sovereignty, about European quality, about the fact that we are Europe. We need to be proud of that and keep working towards federalization.
Qué bonito este sueño que...
What a beautiful dream we have here amongst the Green, the Europe of peoples, feeling part of a whole. Mark, what do you say? Well, thank you. I actually agree with each of your statements. In the line of Angel's words, there is something I wanted to share, and from the new committee of the European Green Party, that's something that we have present, and that's the issue related to moving away from unanimity and the right to veto in terms of foreign policy. That is something that was part of the 8th of May event that Gula mentioned, and then just to add on the other speakers said, first of all, I would like to underline that, of course, there are many things to be improved, but the European Union is a success story. I mean, who would have thought that Spinelli and other political prisoners in 1941 had an idea in a much more complex moment than what we have now. And well, they the general social well-being, the life culture that was brought about in Europe, it's something that we need to preserve and certainly improve. And so I'd like to underline the concept from the federal optic, which is solidarity. In the past 15 years, we've learned lessons from different countries that have suffered differently, but we've learned that when selfishness dominated, for example, after the economic crisis of 2010, when selfishness dominated, things went wrong. However, when attempts are made to provide a more European response where countries help each other and countries really understand each other and put in place and put in common their financial risks, well, this brings about Europeanism and sense of belonging to the project, but always with a view to reach to the daily life of people, as Laura mentioned. This is the challenge. Europe, with housing policies, with energy policies, with transportation policies, with healthcare policies, Europe must be close to people. Because, of course, we know Europe is useful, but we're not actually reaching out to most people.
I mean, now I'm becoming Greek after the Italian, the English. In Greek, demokratia is a very strong word because it is demos and kratos. It means the state and the citizens. And demokratia, it is much more than rule of law, is equality, is equal access to all resources, is being able to eat, to breathe a clean air, to have access to public services. It is participation. It is being able to have majorities and respect minorities, and at the same time not leaving minorities completely blocking the majority decisions. And it is what really we need to rethink in the European Union. And without that, we will be in the hands of autocrats. As we saw with the energy dependency, we created monsters like Putin because we feed him through the years with just banalizing what he has done through the years against the rule of law and his own population and his own political opponents. And I really think that this is the moment that in Europe we need to rebuild trust with the citizens, and the only way to bring trust to the citizens is to empower the citizens in a common project. Thank you.
Pues, señores y señoras, compañeros, compañeras.
Very well, colleagues. This is the Europe we defend, an open, green, social, pacifist, democratic and brave Europe. And we can say that green ideas are no longer a future warning, they are a need for the present. Against noise, right, against fear, democracy, against fossil fuels, renewables, against selfishness, Europe, and against resignation, European Green Party. Thank you so much.
No, que eso... Muy bien, hola, hola. Aquí nadie se va. Vamos a hacer como un rebobinado, aquí no ha pasado nada. Nos vamos después, pero primero vamos a entregar el reconocimiento que no pudimos entregar antes por culpa del Papa.
Tardamos un minuto, pero yo creo que es importante que hagamos este reconocimiento. Entonces, un pelín de silencio, muchísimas gracias. Perdón, yo sé que estamos todas muy cansadas, vamos a hacer esto y después vamos a bailar un poquito. Aquí mismo vamos a bailar. Entonces, yo todavía no me voy a arrancar a bailar, pero os querría pedir 3 minutos de vuestro tiempo, por favor. Gracias. Bueno, vamos con un poco con el rebobinado. Que Pablo y yo antes hemos entregado unos premios. Pablo, si me coges el premio de allí. Y nos falta celebrar el último reconocimiento que queríamos dar hoy. Gracias. Cerramos el reconocimiento que quizás más nos interpela a las mujeres que estamos en la sala, a las que quedamos, porque hay una memoria que durante demasiado tiempo no tuvo nombre, que no estaba en los libros, no estaba en las placas, no ha estado en los juicios, no ha estado escrita y que queremos contribuir desde el Partido Verde a que se empiece a escribir. Es una memoria de las mujeres que el franquismo encerró, controló y humilló simplemente por ser mujeres que no encajaban, que no obedecían. Mujeres cuyo único crimen fue existir fuera de los cánones de un régimen político devastador. Hay personas que dedican su vida a que los nombres no se pierdan, a que las historias perduren, a que las historias hablen y a que nadie tenga que pedir permiso por llorar por lo que le pasó. Así que queremos darle un fuerte aplauso, un agradecimiento inmenso por su trabajo en esta época tan difícil y por haber conseguido llegar hasta aquí desde una ciudad tomada por la Conferencia Episcopal. A Consuelo García del CID, que es una de esas personas superviviente del Patronato de la Mujer, y le entregamos el reconocimiento a la defensa de la memoria de